Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ulla Dybgaard, and on behalf of the Danish Design Center, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's DDC Talks event, where we'll be talking about who sets the direction for future cities. Departing from the cross-European project CENTRINNO, we will discuss ways of organizing and engaging various actors in urban transformation projects. We're grateful that so many of you have chosen to travel here to Blocks today and join us for the CENTRINNO Consortium meeting, as well as this talk. Now, I know you had a full day, so I want to make sure that everyone got caffeine and sugar before we start. You good? Yeah? Okay. And a warm welcome also to those of you joining us online today. After the debate, there'll be a Q&A, and you have a chance to join the conversation. Just ask your questions in the chat, and my colleague Cecilia will make sure to pass them on. Nations talk, cities act. This well-known statement was coined by former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg about 10 years ago. It attempts to capture the inability of nation-states and international institutions to provide solutions for the huge challenges facing the world today, whether environmental, security, or social. The argument goes that cities are more decentralized, more adaptable, more efficient, and closer to their citizens. Indeed, we might be a lot better off if mayors ruled the world, as the renowned political scientist Benjamin Barber put it in his 2013 book. Or would we? For who are, in fact, the central actors in cities when we want to achieve long-lasting positive impact? That's what we'll be talking about today. Together with our brilliant panelists, whom I'll introduce in a minute, we will dive into the concrete learnings and individual experiences from the CENTRINNO project, which aims to transform old industrial areas and turn them into hubs for both innovation and sustainability. An important characteristic of the CENTRINNO project is its ability to mobilize more than just mayors. Throughout the project, citizens, small business owners, local craftsmen, and many more have been involved in the process of developing these urban areas. Mobilization is also key to the work that we do here at Danish Design Center. We use a mission-driven approach in all that we do, which means never working alone. That is just one of the good reasons to apply missions to complex challenges in a city context. My good colleague, Julie Hjort, is here to tell you more about how Danish Design Center uses missions. Julie?
Thank you very much, Ulla. Hi everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. My name is Julie Hjort, and I'm a Director of Sustainable Transition here at the Danish Design Center. Just get this, it works, wonderful. And I work every day to apply a mission-oriented approach in regards to the circular transition, to the shift to a circular economy. But I'm just going to try to unpack the idea of mission-oriented innovation. I don't have much time, so just briefly to give you an idea about what we mean. And I hope it can maybe inspire the debate afterwards on who leads the transition in cities and how do we sort of deal with the elements of the, you know, with the position of the mayor, the citizens, who's actually the powerhouses in setting the direction for our future cities. So this is just a little humble introduction. So what are missions? Are they the new black? I don't know about you, but I've met this word mission-oriented innovation so many times over the last year. It's an idea that's quite new in terms of how we organize innovation, but it's actually a really old notion and concept that's been here for a very long time. A really good example of a mission is the moon landing. When it was declared back in, I forget the exact date, was it 61? Yeah, that we actually set the ambition to land on the moon, and 8 years after, we actually managed the moon landing. It was one of those very bold, ambitious goals, something that we'd never done before, something that we, to a big extent, actually didn't know how to do, but we set the direction, and we got there. And it's one of those very clear and very bold impacts that everyone understands, all right? So we know when we got there, we didn't land halfway to the moon, we actually had a man on the moon. And this idea that we can actually mobilize is that we can set a very ambitious direction for a transition we want to make, knowing that there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of experimentation in getting there. That's, you know, some of the most, you know, that's a really important part of mission-oriented innovation. So the lady behind this idea is called Mariana Mazzucato. She's a professor at the University College of London and has written several books. She's guided the European Commission and actually helped and scope and define the 4 missions that are part of the Green Deal. And she's worked with governments over several years, and as a way of using governments as a key definer of missions. But what's really interesting with mission-oriented I'm going to just jump in here, with mission-oriented innovation, it's about looking at the very complex challenges that we're facing, and those are really well defined by the sustainability goals that we all know, defining these bold impacts and ideas that we actually want to reach a target. But then where all this stuff happens, where the magic happens, is in that combination of bottom-up collaboration between citizens, mayors, cities, industry, education, philanthropies, and whatnot. And it's about balancing these clear and high, setting the direction for long-term goals, and having a portfolio of different solutions that meets that. And if you just go back to this, I just skipped the slide. So like the basic definition, it's being challenged, and it's continuously. But by Mariana Mazzucato, is having a mission is about defining a defined impact for a concrete area, and it has to be bold, inspirational, and widely relevant to society. So it's like really relatable for everyone, and it has to be clearly framed and targeted and time-bound in terms of really, prioritizing and committing to the change that we want to make. Okay, just a second, yeah. So working with missions, I guess it's, it sounds kind of easy, just, defining a goal and getting there, but it actually challenges a lot of the way that a lot of organizations are working with innovation and have been working with innovation for several years. So if this is a bit, it's a bit black-white, but if we look at a more like traditional innovation approach, you have people coming together, also the classic Silicon Valley model, people coming together, looking at a challenge and saying, how might we solve this problem? Developing a variety of different solutions, testing them, narrowing it down, and then coming up with that one or big bet that we can actually invest in and move forward with. And when you work with mission-oriented innovation, it's about really reversing this idea. So you actually start by committing to the future you want to be in, not exactly knowing how to get there. So you start by saying, we're going to land on the moon. That's one example, but maybe more obvious examples now is we're going to have a 70% reduction in carbon by 2030 in Denmark. That's what we're saying. People are committing to very high and complex goals in terms of climate change or social justice. So starting by engaging people, organizations around a new narrative for a new change, and then setting tons of new initiatives in motion that all, in many different ways, support this new future, this new system. So, and this is just a very different way of working, where you have to facilitate collaboration across these. It could be, for instance, as I work with the circular transition, I don't only look at what kind of business models do we need to develop in the industry. I also look at what kind of regulation needs to support those business models. And what about the users, the citizens who are on the other side of these solutions? How do they act? And how about education in terms of understanding materials and products? So it's always, it's systemic, it's complex. And if we really need to change the system, which we do when we talk about these hard environmental and societal problems, we need to address them from many different angles and also many different conflicting angles. And this is a different approach to innovation. And sorry, I'm just jumping around here on my slides. So it's about understanding what are the leverage points, what are those small, acupuncture steps where you can actually create a change. Instead of just doing more of what we do today, how do you change that system? What are those? Sometimes I like the analogy of, acupuncture. You have the whole body and it's in pain, but if you can stick your needle there and there, you find things happening. So where do you put your needle when you want to create a change in terms of city change or environmental change, and identifying that in bottom-up collaborations? When we work with missions at the Danish Design Center, we do it by applying design as an approach a way of working with innovation. And for those of you where that's a little bit abstract to you, I'm just going to try to make it a little bit more clear. Working with design is it's always about challenging, asking why, always about exploring the assumptions behind what we're doing. It's a very human-centered approach, so it always looks at the needs of the user, the value that is created with and for and in collaboration with the user. It's experimental to its core, so it's always about testing and iterating with prototypes when you're finding different solutions. And lastly, it's very concrete. So how do you make that transition tangible, visual? How do you make it relatable for across different kinds of people with different backgrounds? That's how we work at the Danish Design Center, and applying this approach in all of our different projects and in missions. And in this mission-oriented world where more and more organizations, industry, countries, the European Commission are saying we're working with missions, we find that design really has a role to play here. So what I think is a very powerful force with design is about helping how to imagine these systemic shifts. I think especially, for instance, working with sustainability, science is telling us a lot about what to move away from, what not to do, how we shouldn't be, but what does the future actually look like? How does it actually feel, smell, taste like? How does that actually draw us in the future? And I think we have a role to play there. When we set this very ambitious directions, we also need to paint an engaging picture. And in acknowledging that if we set a 10-year or 20-year goal, we need to experiment in our road of getting there. And design is just one skill among many. So I think with working with missions, it's about also connecting all these different skills and stakeholders there are in truly interdisciplinary collaboration. At the Danish Design Center, we are unpacking this mission-driven approach all the time, and we built a playbook. It's online, you can download it. It's a beta version. We are constantly trying to improve it. But we developed this model that I think is, it's not rocket science, but it's actually quite helpful for us, is when you work with a mission approach, when you work with this impact approach, you need to be aware of three dimensions, and often, unfortunately, at the same time. It's always like that. So how do you set the direction? Going back to what is the future? How do you mobilize stakeholders across a future, a desired future? How do we mobilize the ecosystem? Who are the stakeholders that are actually there to change the system? Who's there to actually provide new solutions, new value, new collaboration? And how do you build, what kind of capacity needs to be built? And capacity is a very broad word, but that means skills, framework, regulations, what actually supports people in this transition. And how do you sort of navigate these three dimensions all at once? And today we're talking about missions in a city context, and we're going to be diving into that. And we've seen more and more that cities can really be a strong driver for missions, and also because they are what Ulla initially said, just in a very physical, place-based area for actually committing to something, but in a closer collaborations with cities. So I think there's something very powerful here. And at the Danish Design Center, we're currently trying to explore and build more focus on how we can support missions and cities in working with missions. Just to give you some examples of what's happening in sort of the mission area in cities, we have the European Commission's mission for city, the mission. So about creating 100 climate neutral and smart cities, and by 2030. And this is about, you probably all know this also in the CENTRINNO project, but this is a way of identifying 100 cities that can be, experimental and innovative hubs that can also, push, more European cities in a transformations to be climate neutral. So that's one of those very grand missions. We have a great example with Amsterdam that has been really progressive in working for circularity, working to be fully circular in 2050, and in doing that, as cutting waste specifically. I think it's within food, within products, and within the construction industry. And I think cities. Okay, I'm going to narrow down on another city here. So here we are in in Sweden, this is kind of a different mission, but this was formulated by Vinnova in Sweden to ensure that every street in Sweden is healthy, sustainable, and vibrant by 2030. That's kind of a little bit of a different target. It's a little bit more tricky to measure, right? But it's a very clear direction, and it's also a little bit more of a mobilizing, engaging direction than, for instance, a reduction in carbon that is a little bit less relatable. And I think cities are powerful in the way that they can actually work on a very broad, meta plan, looking at frameworks and regulation, but actually zoom in on a neighborhood, zoom in on a street, and zoom in on the value with the local community. And there's a really strong power in that we're really interested in exploring further in the Danish Design Center. So, going to stop talking soon. Just it's a bit of an invitation here, because we at the Danish Design Center have explored this potential, because we know that systemic change in society can be enabled through this mission-driven approach, and we know how cities are really substantial driver for this transition. So we believe that by applying mission-oriented innovation within cities, we can see more impact. So we are actually in the middle of unpacking some work together with a broad group of partners on building capacity for cities to actually work with mission-oriented innovation, and how to go from one thing is setting the clear targets. It's hard, but it's all about the work of mobilizing the ecosystem and engaging communities and industries in these cross-sector collaborations. So this is also actually an invitation to reach out to us at the Danish Design Center if you have experiences in this work, because we are hoping to, by the end of this year, build some resources, tools, and a methodology to actually push this agenda even further in cities. Yes. Thank you. Clap, clap, clap.
We just need to get that back to the initial slide, if we can.
I can.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. And now we'll turn to the panel. But first, I'd like to briefly introduce those of you who are not part of CENTRINNO to the project. Now, as I mentioned before, CENTRINNO is a European project focused on the transformation of industrial heritage sites in cities. It aims to show how these sites can become hubs of entrepreneurship, as well as a driver for regenerative urban transformation. The project is anchored in 9 different cities, and the local pilot sites and teams are organized in very different ways. Today, we will draw on the experiences of the project so far and discuss what we can learn from the different ways of organizing and involving a wide range of actors. We have invited 4 CENTRINNO representatives from different cities to tell us more about their work and approach to the project. Some of the pilot projects are anchored in municipalities, some are anchored in private businesses, and each of them has approached engagement of outside actors in a different manner. So, without further ado, it's my pleasure to present our brilliant panel from Milan, Paris, Tallinn, and of course, Copenhagen. Please welcome them to the stage. Liat, if you can sit at the end. Liat, Alex, Karen, Mikkel. I feel like I should be presenting you Eurovision style. Very cross-European today. So, from Milan, we have Liat
Only
Rogel.
if we can get points afterwards, right?
I'm going to be keeping score. You can sing a song afterwards and keep score. From Milan, we have Liat Rogel, expert in design for social innovation, project manager at Manifattura Milano and Comune di Milano. Liat is passionate about creative processes and developing new tools for design thinking, as well as innovative strategies towards sustainability. Liat coordinates and manages local and European projects aiming at improving the urban lifestyle from an environmental and social point of view. She's currently the project manager of Milan's pilot action of the CENTRINNO project promoting circular economy. As founder of Housing Lab and director of the Impact Housing Foundation, she facilitates processes of urban housing renewal and explores how private investments may be used to generate more housing options. Liat holds a PhD in design from Politecnico di Milano and teaches social innovation in IES Abroad, Milan. From Paris, we have Alex Mizar, Alex describes himself as a reluctant digital start-upper. After 10 years of traveling as an anthropological documentary director, he co-founded a digital communication company which has gradually evolved into a startup offering an interactive video learning solution. He then co-founded an app transforming eco-responsible actions into local and solidarity-based cryptocurrency. In his own words, it was a great flop. Afterwards, he dedicated himself to teaching and training on social and collaborative economy and a critical approach to impact tech. He is now part of the coordination team of the CENTRINNO's Paris pilot and studies the influence of federative narratives coming from the past to reorient the future. It's very poetic, Alex. I like that. And from Tallinn, we have Kain Krupp. Kain is the Tallinn pilot coordinator of CENTRINNO. She has a background in economics, computer science, and technology governance. Her current interests and focus are digital commons, open cooperativism, circular economy, and resilient systems design. The CENTRINNO pilot project in Tallinn will turn Kopli 93, an old culture center, into an experimentation lab and a local Fab City hub for self-organization and resilience. And finally, right here from Copenhagen, we have Mikkel Holst. Mikkel is head of office for internationalization and sustainability in the city of Copenhagen. Mikkel is one of the initiators of the Copenhagen pilot in CENTRINNO as part of a continuous focus on exploring new approaches to sustainable city development. Prior to his current position, Mikkel has worked in different positions at the city of Copenhagen and the Danish government, where he, among other things, developed and tested different approaches to citizen engagement and sustainability issues. Mikkel is also co-founder of the first makerspace in Copenhagen that specifically targets professionals. Please welcome all of them, and again, we expect you to sing afterwards. I'll keep score. Liat, take us to Milan for a minute and describe this local manufacturing network that you're developing in the CENTRINNO project. Who have you involved so far and why?
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation, for being here. I'll take you to Milan. When the CENTRINNO project started, it was a good opportunity to reflect about local manufacturing. And Milan is a city, is a thriving city that is based on manufacturing, but the old manufacturing, the industrial manufacturing has left the cities in the 80s, like happened in many, many cities. And the reflection of how to evaluate the manufacturing in the city has been there also before CENTRINNO. So some work has been done to really give value to those who are still making in the city. And making, we mean makers that are artisans, that are craftsmen, and makers because they are using also new technologies. And this has been there. And then came the CENTRINNO project, which gave us the idea of thinking about not only the importance of manufacturing in the city, but how this relates to the green transition. So how could this be sustainable? And we really liked the idea coming from the Fab City of thinking about how you make things locally and you move files, and this is of course one aspect of it, and the other one is the circular economy. So how could waste, which is produced in the city, a lot of waste, can actually be used by local manufacturer to bring back to the city what it needs? So this was the idea in Milan that we began to play with when we began with CENTRINNO. And then the question was, who do we involve? Okay, and we know that a lot is happening in Milan, but we also know that as a municipality, we don't know exactly who is doing what. And one approach that that we are adopting is a very open approach to discover the stakeholders that would like to be part of this and to ask them if they feel that they are part of the community. So it was not us picking the people or the target group to involve, but it was a little bit like we've seen before in the presentation. We set a sort of mission with a vision of where is it that we want to go. So it was the fab city idea with the 15-minute city idea, with the idea of local production. We elaborated it into a shorter phrase so that we can announce that we are beginning with this project, and then we just launched an open call. And 80 organizations answered to this first call. Most of them are producers in the fashion and the design industry, which is the one that sectors that we decided to focus on. And then we have also the academic world, the services, anyone that felt that they are part of this process answered the call. And since then, so for more than 2 years now, we have been working with this community of producers. So our main focus with the pilot is really understanding the needs of the manufacturing stakeholders in the city.
So very much a voluntary approach, it sounds like, or an open call, basically. Looking back at how the project developed, are there actors that you wish you would have involved earlier, or other actors you would have involved, or in fact, are there fewer actors you think should have been involved?
Well, as always, in the beginning you get a certain number, like 80, and then the people that are actually participating, we opened 2 permanent working groups with those people, and we always got, I would say, a third of those initial 80 to participate. It's, I think, a normal ratio when you work in a participatory way. And we realized that we are not the community we're working with are not representative of everyone. But it was very good also with this smaller number to really go and deep dive into certain issues. So for example, one working group was more related to a material, so to textile. And we explored with this group, how do you reuse textile and how do you use dead stock, and it was one topic, and the other group was more about how do you work on a neighborhood level. And the fact that they were little, maybe they did not represent everyone, but they allowed us to deep dive into those topics. And then actually in February, we hold a big event, and it was again made with an open call because we felt the need to enlarge the amount of organizations that are participating, and we had clearer ideas of what we were doing. So we reopened, and in fact, we got answers in the participation of stakeholders that were not involved before. This time it was really called Circular Milan, and we requested the stakeholders that would like to exhibit their products or to have a talk or to hold a workshop. So also there we got different responses, because if you are producing something, probably you want to exhibit it. But if you are from the academy, then maybe you want to talk. And yeah, now this allows us to speak with more people. We can see if we look at the map, because like every pilot in the CENTRINNO project, we are mapping the stakeholders. We can say that we don't have enough of repair places in the city, for example. So we can now see that, okay, if we want to make a complete map, we still need to reach out to specific stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. And Alex, the same question to Paris. Who did you involve in the CENTRINNO Paris pilot, and why?
First of all, let me speak about the topic which we have in CENTRINNO, which is alternative urban food system. In fact, in Paris, we are like two-sided, because we have to cope with the overall CENTRINNO objective, which is try to regenerate old industrial heritage places. So on one side, we are in the northeast of Paris. So it's a very small, not small, it's 2 districts in Paris, the 19th and the 18th districts. And we work specifically in this place. We have a building, we have 2 places. One is not still open due to bureaucratic reasons, but it's common in France. The other is open, and it's based on an old, not old, it's a building from the 50s. It's a very particular architecture, it's called brutalist architecture. And we opened a Fab City Hub, trying to gather a community mostly based on social and sustainable economy, and trying to create, of course, synergies, but also awareness. And on the other side, we work on, as I said, the alternative urban food system. We will open a major place called the Jardin des Traverses. It's like 800 linear meters of ancient railroad surrounding Paris. And with Sébastien, who is there from Verger Urbain and all the Paris team, we try to make like a food city hub, if I may say. So it's a place where we will grow things with a lot of innovative techniques, but also relying on the past. We will do some kind of schooling to help people training or retraining to find some new working opportunities. Restaurant, of course, so everything linked to food. So we have 3 pillars like production, distribution, transformation and distribution, which we have to question to try to create a new way to produce food and to rely citizens with food. So that's the place. Who are we involving in Paris? So we have a chance, the main actor in the Paris pilot is Fab City Grand Paris. So we were already built as a network. So it was easier for us to gather people, but we noticed in the beginning of the project that it's not so easy to have like the click to gather everyone to do some concrete actions. So we have to find a way to gather people. It was through the heritage, which is one of the CENTRINNO's pillars. Because we found we had a lot of luck in Paris, because we found like already made narrative that allowed us to gather people, which were that Paris in the 19th century was the cradle of a new way to produce food. With demand, people, Paris was a city that was really increasing at the time. So there was a big need to produce food, and market gardeners was like in a friendly competition to invent new techniques. And we saw that these techniques checked all the boxes that we need for CENTRINNO. And it was easier to gather people around this. So we have like makers, of course, designers, urban farmers, of course, but also institutions and academics. And we try to not reinvent, but to rely on the past to see how it can help to enlighten the future of like the food city or an edible city, if I may say.
So also a bit of this narratives coming from the past to reorient the future, that you use this narrative from the 19th century to actually create action in the present and
exactly. And we notice that it's, for example, when you speak about the future in a prospective way, it can generate some fear or some, it can be anguishing. And if you rely on the past just to have like a dialectical tool, it can be very reassuring. People say, okay, if it was done, we can do it again.
They've solved challenges before.
Yeah.
More serious maybe. Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. Kain, tell us a bit about the Tallinn pilot and who's involved in that.
Yeah, first maybe starting with again explaining the context a little bit. Many of the other cities in the CENTRINNO project already had some kind of maker community established or some maker spaces, so they had been doing some testing in the sphere. I guess when we talk about the very practical side of CENTRINNO, then the point is that we believe that there are some kind of maker spaces or community hubs or hubs that we call Fab City hubs that should be able to solve many problems. But with the case of Tallinn and in Estonia in general, there wasn't even too many those public makerspaces available. So the thing that the makerspace was quite a strange thing for people. And what we managed to do with CENTRINNO and with the help of some other projects was to open the first publicly open makerspace for the Tallinn citizens, just to see how this movement is gonna develop in the scene, like what action does it create. And also it enabled us to create a platform for the circular economy topic, for this local production topic and the heritage part, which was a huge thing for the Tallinn past that actually enabled us to live much more circularly that we are doing or living today. For me, like this Fab City Hub that we are there creating or already have been created, has been created there in Copley 93, which is our pilot site, is that it really to me looks like a very magical place where lots of things can happen and can live, can really express, for example, the community part or the resilience part, that it's not only about the things we produce, but it's about the connections that people are making. Also the security, the feeling of security, being networked in your own community of citizens, of makers. So we really put some more effort into the other parts that the makerspace can, the other functions that the makerspace can really help us with. And so we started this vision, and the main things that we needed, or the main stakeholders, partners, for this to happen was to engage the local people, to really have the people being part of this journey and reflecting back. Is a makerspace even a thing for them? Do they, like, what's the function? What can be the function for them? The other part was stakeholders. We involved mostly stakeholders that actually have the vocational capacity to bring back the skills or bring in new skills, to teach the people to experiment with new projects. We also involved like recycling centers for the materials part in the makerspace. We have very strong partnership with the city, also the city being in the project, but the city is quite big, so there are many different departments that we had to involve for them to be really part of this experience of the like the tests that we are running there. So yeah, those are the main partners.
Great. And Mikkel?
Yeah. So the Copenhagen pilot has tried to pull like a great trick, right? We do what we call in CENTRINNO language a decentralized hub. I think we're the last pilot city that still try to work decentralized, while Amsterdam kind of, does a centralized hub. So decentralized hub is an idea. We don't have like an actual building where everything goes on and then people come in and do stuff and leave again, but we have like different actors in the area doing different stuff.
In the area of Nordvest.
In the pilot area of Nordvest, yeah, thank you, where we're working in Copenhagen. So what we did in the beginning was to identify the core actors, and also, had that idea, if we identified those actors in the area that has like a surplus of resource, not necessarily materials, but more like space or just, man hours to engage in the local community. We could, get them together in a network, engage them, and get them to, do all the activities that is in the CENTRINNO project. And that proved a lot more difficult than, just imagined from the beginning. This means we approached actors like local landowners, investors, developers, Democracy Garage, which is a really interesting institution up there, but was just moved in when we started the pilot. We have a local library up there, and then there was this makerspace. I come back to that. We started working with these people, but it turned out really early in the process it was almost impossible to align the interests, or I guess the different actors had a very closed vision on what their task is in the area. Democracy Garage, of course, has to maintain a sustainable business. So, we can come with all ideas, but how should they have the resource to actually reach out in a different way than we imagined? And that goes the same for the library, even though they're colleagues in the city of Copenhagen, same department. They have a set program. They can do small things, but not really major things. So we have to kind of reorient the project, I guess, a little bit through the process. And luckily, one of the partners, the Makerspace in Northwest, also reoriented at the same time. They were original partners, also funded partners, but they got a new management 2 years ago. Rasmus is part of the audience here and part of the Makerspace. And I guess it also reoriented what was the meaning of the Makerspace. So the Makerspace actually took upon themselves a lot of the responsibilities that is to do some of the CENTRINNO activities, the schooling, the gathering of community in the area. So we kind of moved from the decentralized thing to actually having some centralized thing through the makerspace, but it's never been formalized. Parallel to this, we have involved all the entrepreneurs and the actors in the area that's interested through like a business organization network. We're a little late to start that up, and it starts to go by itself now. And I think the interesting part is that when we finally let go a little bit more, then you started to get all the actors a little bit more engaged in that. So we also have Democracy Garage and some of these people actually contributing more than before when we were really trying to pull them into the project. So yeah,
Interesting.
there's been a few pivots in the project.
All right. Yeah. Speaking of flexibility, adaptability, yeah. I noticed you all nodded when Mikkel talked about different interests coming together and having to join them around maybe a joint mission or whichever approach you used. Does anyone want to share their experiences in doing that?
In Tallinn, we had a lot of help of the crisis that just continually happens throughout the project. And every time, like, huge problem emerges or a crisis, like pandemic, war, whatever it can be, very huge thing. Then, like, you have to change your life anyways. So people are like, okay, new things are happening again. I have to adapt. And I think we really used those crisis points to start new discussion around resilience. Like, what I would say is that makerspaces are really a point of resilience because the focus is to spread more skills, to increase the diversity of skills and and strengths, capacities that you have in the city. And also the community part, that if you have a connection points for just local people, even if you think about stakeholders, makers, they're just people in the end. Even like policy makers and city governors are people, and they also live there. So, but you have to have some points of connection when something bad can happen, and when we were around the table talking about, like, okay, when the next crisis is gonna hit, we should have some better plan, and you don't even have like connection points or gathering points for people. People are just lost, don't know what to do. But if they had like a nice neighbor whom they could ask, like, I don't know, where I can take shelter or whatever, you feel quite more secure. And when we started talking about the resilience factor of a makerspace, then everybody was very interested.
So using crises as sort of a lever to make people come around a common goal.
Because talking about the green transition, we are doing that because climate change imposes many crises, or it means many crises are happening in the future, and we constantly have to adapt. And the way out of it is to be a very efficient person that can adapt. You have to be very quick and very efficient in that. You have to feel comfortable in that. And if you have to already adapt in the crisis that we have experienced, then people understand that, okay, this is our lifestyle now, what we can do about it. So
empowering basically to take some sort of action in the face of uncertainty. Excellent. And Alex, in the Paris pilot, you've also had to make several different actors meet around a common goal.
Yes.
How have you approached it?
Well, first of all, when we speak about mission, we have not to forget the vision. So always connected. So we have to realize that everybody is short-sighted. So the long-term vision is something that everybody has also, but they have their own objectives. Each actor has their own objectives, and we need to not to cut, but to design humble steps in an iterative process rather than a massive planification, because it allows all different type of actors, including institutions, policymakers, to connect with your goals. So it's better to have very, very short steps, humble, not very small goals that, for example, a makerspace can connect with. For example, if we speak about vocational training, they can manage to afford a place or some human resources when you say, okay, we're just going to do this concrete action, which is very small, but that is like a chapter in a global narrative. So that was our approach. We didn't succeed every time. It allowed to make a little bit of magic at least.
Well, the part of experimentation
Yeah.
is failing sometimes,
Yeah.
right? And that's when you learn. So that sounds great. And Liat, in terms of involving local stakeholders, have you experienced challenges because your project was rooted within the municipality, or has that been a strength?
Both, I would say. So first of all, every participatory process has challenges because you deal with many people and with many points of views, and with vision and mission, we say to think you are a lion but acting like a cat, you know. So it's,
Excellent expression.
and I would say I will try to speak about, I think, the main challenge, and then we see if the municipality, of course, has something to do with that. We asked for many people to participate, to come to our meetings, to come to our working groups, and you're asking people of their time and their energy, and not always can you give something more than a vision. And of course, this vision, if it's shared, then each finds the motivation to take these small steps and to work together, but it's not always so clear. So for us, we ask ourselves many times, I mean, how do we call them? What do we give back? Yes, you can offer a beer, but it's not
Always
enough.
work.
It works for some time, but then if people begin to think, yes, but what is it that we're getting back? And to manage this balance, to say we are working together also to understand what is it that you are getting back, no? So for example, all of the stakeholders that are manufacturers, that are makers, asked for visibility. They wanted to be more visible. And they talk with us as the municipality to say, maybe you have spaces, maybe you have money, maybe you have strategies to give us visibility. And this is not always easy because money we don't have. That's very easy. In Milan, we don't have money in the municipality. Spaces, we have some. But then we discussed this before. How do you give a space to some people and not to other? How do you deal with competition? What are the criteria that you have for spaces, right? So we do use other tools in the municipality to enable these kind of small project, bottom-up projects. We have quite innovative ways of doing that, and this I think is an advantage because we manage to offer small contributions, both of money or coaching or training for the producers to get involved. The disadvantage is, of course, we had in this time, beyond the pandemic and the war, a huge non-stability politically. So we had an election, and this meant, for example, that our director needed to step out, and for some months we did not have a director, and then he came back in. And in the meantime, what are you doing, and where is the vision? Is it going to be the same after the election? So the disadvantage of working with the municipality is also that you have this uncertainty. So I think that what we are trying to do now, also reaching the end of the CENTRINNO project, is thinking how would these stakeholders take ownership? This would be the most important thing for us because it's very nice that the municipality is an enabler. I think it's already very nice to think that the public administration is not only a service provider taking care of the road and so on. So we are enabling, but I think you cannot think that the municipality will be in charge of a FAB City hub, honestly. So we are trying now to understand how the community can take ownership of that, and this is challenging.
So securing long-term engagement
Absolutely.
and not just another innovation project that dies
Beyond
after the
political
period, right?
decisions, no. So the more you give the ownership, the more you can have a long-term stability.
Mikkel, the same situation in Copenhagen. The pilot is also anchored within the municipality, the city of Copenhagen here. And you said now it's quite decentralized. But what have you experienced in terms of reactions from local stakeholders? Are they reacting at all to the fact that it's the city, positive, negative, indifferent?
That's a good question. If they are really negative, they kept it from me, and I'm looking down. So I don't think we are seen as bad guys. In Copenhagen, we have these urban renewal programs that are really localized. So you have actual, people from the city living or working very close to where they work. So I guess it's city government is not seen as something really distant in Copenhagen. That's in my general interpretation. But to reflect on what Leah just said is, in general, I'm a really happy man when I'm looking back on what we actually accomplished in the project now, because we have a huge yield in strategy or policy making from this project. But it doesn't relate that much to the pilot area. It relates to the city scale, and I guess that is really much a result being that we are the city, and there's a natural pull for us, like from the system, to create something that can be used at the city hall by the decision makers to create a difference in the city. And they're of course looking at the city level and not necessarily the hyper local level. Just to give a few examples, we have used analysis from CENTRINNO to influence the upcoming, or to inform the upcoming municipal general plan that comes every 5 years. We have a lot of initiatives now. There's a new fund out that people can apply for, which basically comes from the conversation that started with CENTRINNO. So there's a lot of, initiatives that has the potential to have quite big impacts without Copenhagen. On the other side, I would say that it's been harder for us to engage locally because we are the city and we are bound of like what limits are to political discourse at all the time. So we cannot, speak freely or go against existing policy or something like that. We are part of the system, and a lot of what Fab City calls for or CENTRINNO hubs are also counterculture and resistance to the existing thing. So we're like caught a little bit in between that. Yeah.
So those are the yields for the municipality, like long-term policy shaping, etc. If you were to take a guess at the yields for the yields for the community, the yields for Nordvest and that area, do you see, in terms of also long-term engagement, do you see the project living on and creating yields for Nordvest?
I'm looking at Rasmus again, because he's one of the guys who's got to take over, I guess, hopefully when we pull out, in half a year and we don't have any more project resources to do something in there. Hopefully, yes. I guess one thing is a big difference is it's actually been possible to mobilize a lot of local actors in the area and just get them to meet, because it didn't do that before. And then hopefully they'll work it out now and see there's a value in that. And we try to support that in different ways. We hope that, the politician would see there's a value in having these local business or change organization communities, and to support them one way or the other, so they can sustain not only in the pilot area. And I think the realization for a lot of the actors there, that they actually have some shared goals. In our pilot, it's a lot connected to rising housing or space prices for space and production space, for example. Then they actually can mobilize and try to make a change. So maybe it's a small thing just to get people to meet, but then again, it can has a big results in the end.
And in Tallinn, you've actually managed to build an entire ecosystem of local actors, as I understand it. You have vocational schools, NGOs, maker spaces, artisans, businesses, activists. How have you approached this very complex task, and have you found anything particularly challenging about it?
In our case, the Tallinn city in general is smaller than some of the city districts in some of the bigger cities. So Estonia and Tallinn is so small that we were able to catch the others when we started from zero to build an entire ecosystem. But it's tiny. It's tiny, but it's very all-encompassing or very broad. It has all the different actors, and to do that, we really started. I can say bottom up. The CENTRINNO project in Estonia is owned by Tallinn municipality and Tallinn Technical University, huge stakeholders, huge organizations. But us in the project, we weren't really afraid to put our own hands in the dirt and be the grassroots activists. So what we did, we had all the leverage and the possibilities that the city provided, giving us a space where we could really do the makerspace experiments. I was the entire team was there the entire summer, just fixing up old furniture and building the makerspace. And then the next day you change the clothes covered in paint and went on the meetings with the mayor, and like you had all the different layers. And I think we were very relatable because we were also on the same position in some ways as all the stakeholders were. Like you have the question of sustainability, like how the hub can exist in the future. But I think the key has really been to be in all of the different roles and really try to make this change together and to really understand what are the difficulties also for others, and what the community really wants. And I think the biggest thing that we have achieved in this chaos and testing out different roles and different strategies is that we have really created a political pressure, because the community is the main, like they're the clients or the main people who go to the space all the time, they use it. And if the municipality, that's also like us in some way, but in real life it's actually some other people who are more authority in making decisions. We have to prove them that this is a space that people really want and need. And now we have like a huge community supporting this argument that they would make a scandal if this space would close down. And we don't even have to like explain that we need it, but we're just there and watching things happening. And I've even made a joke that I really would enjoy this show if they would close down and really end some of the transformations or processes that we have initiated, because the people are so into it. And it would be very scandalous if they would try to even like change the course of this process.
So really immersing yourself and becoming very visible in the project.
Yeah,
and
we
taking
have become
active
very
part in it.
visible. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. I just want to make sure I keep an eye on the time. Cecilia, how much time do we have left? 10 minutes? Great. So let's just go to the last question for you, and then we'll go to the Q&A. So if we are to draw conclusions today, who sets the direction for future cities? Do we have to rely entirely on local city governments, or is it crucial that the transformation grows from local needs? I know we're putting this up in a binary way, but I'd be interested to hear where you'd start. Alex?
It's a vast question. I think to envision the future of cities, it's like quite a research program in itself. So as a research program, there is something we get to recall, that time is our friend. So we need to go like very slow in one way, but to base this process to strengthening a common vision. So that's the first point. And if I may try an analogy, for example, the capacity of an organism to evolve is by the lack of diversity in its cells. So the more different type of cells you have, the more you can evolve. So, and they speak to each other and so on. So that's what we tried to do in Paris. So we have to involve the maximum of different type of stakeholders, but binding them by by something they recognize. So it can be a narrative, it can be a goal. That's quite so. Everyone should be involved in the future of cities. In fact, you have, but we need to have like some kind of working plan. So we have to choose during at least the time of CENTRINNO with who we're gonna work, and it's quite like an opportunity. It's a willingness to work with us that drive what we are doing. It's not the opposite. I like the scheme of the megaphone, but it's not so. We can resume it by a single scheme, because it's always back to another.
Push-pull.
The funnel, the megaphone, it's
Yeah.
always up and going.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you adapt to that if it's a constant shift back and forth?
But we listen a lot and we try to adapt. But as I say, we are short-sighted too in the team. So
it's a challenge. Yeah. Yeah. And Liat, who sets the
Yes.
direction for future cities?
It's a very difficult question, of course. I think it's what's always incredible. We've learned now about Copenhagen, but also when visiting other cities or learning the changes that these cities have had in not so many years are incredible. And I would not be so sure to say that someone set the exact direction for those cities. And really, it's quite impossible for us to predict and to say this city will be successful or this city will go down. And this, because if we really look at the last 20 or 30 years, so not even so much more than that, things have happened that I'm not sure had a precise direction beforehand. So I'm not so confident to also give, you know, the answer that says yes. Some people set the direction for cities, and if I add to that the experience that we all had with the pandemic and other events, but I think all of us felt this thing that, oh, maybe this now is taking a completely different direction. So in Milan we have very high prices of housing and so on. And during pandemic, people said, maybe people will not use the offices anymore, and maybe everything will be empty, and maybe people will go and live in the countryside, and will. So maybe the direction of the city will be completely different. And this, at a certain point, we had to think about it. So I think it's more about what was said here also in the beginning, to be able and move and navigate within different possible scenarios. This is probably the first thing. So how we can adapt. Then, as let's say a person working within the public administration, I'd like to think that you have a vision for the future of the city, for a positive future of your city that is inclusive, that is sustainable, and that you set it, I think, locally, but that you try to influence the national policies, the European policies, because the city, it's true, it's the city that acts, but sometimes you are blocked because you are within national or European laws. And I think Europe has a lot of power also, because when Europe sets a set of goals or a set of lines, as we can see, we are requested and we follow some of the streams. So I think also Europe has a big role here.
Yeah. So reality check, going back to the intro, that cities are more adaptable, more flexible, more efficient. Is that your experience as well, working within the city government?
I'm not sure that that is more flexible, for example.
It was a kind of question, sorry.
Yeah. But I think cities are great organizations really to act.
Yeah.
So I believe that the importance that is given also, I have to mark in the last years, to cities is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alex and Mikkel, quick remarks, and we'll go to Q&A and comments afterwards.
What we see in CENTRINNO is that we bypass the nation in this type of programs. We are directly connected. We connect Europe to cities, and the nation is not involved anymore. So maybe it's something to dig. We know that we have to lower the scale to give birth to concrete actions, but we also have to connect everything in a larger scale, enough to be regulated and to disseminate. So maybe that's a main question. If we want to tackle the future, is nation still?
We're just eliminating them.
Yeah, maybe. No
borders. And Mikkel, you a
that
from you as well?
kind of relates to my point, because when you said that we had a pandemic, we started imagining all this possible future. It was really exciting for many people, and then we just moved back on track.
Yes.
And that has been just been like the most mind-blowing thing about it in many ways, that the systemic track is so set that it's almost impossible for change, even though we actually been doing something else. And when you talk about who are the front runners of change, or where does change come from, it's really hard to say, because it seems to me like there's systemic issues that has to be addressed. And we go all the way back to your question, can cities be the front runners of this? I don't know. Do we need nations? Do we need do we need to change global economy? Or there's like really huge questions that kind of pops up from this. That as a CENTRINNO, as a project, can maybe show like small-scale demonstrators, but we need to, change what's going on in the way we produce in China and stuff like that. How do we do that? That's a really good question.
Well, I'll interpret that as your answer to the
It's
to
like
the question,
I have no
Mikkel,
idea.
but, I think we're all
the answer,
it's complex. Kind, the last word. Who sets the
I would
direction for future cities?
I would also say I have no idea. It's such a complex topic. If you ask like who, or I would even add what sets direction for future cities, and I think that really the economic environment, environmental environment, also the psychological, societal environment is the real deal here, and we have the possibility to adapt. Now the question is, who is the stakeholder, or who is the institution or a person or community who has the strongest capacity to adapt the quickest? And I think smaller entities, smaller organizations, I think the community level is like the best level in which the adaptability is the quickest. But the bigger institutions have much more influence. That's why they have to be so much more conservative in their action, because they can also have a very bad impact if they just move too quickly or rapidly or make very bad decisions. So that's why they are slow. The slowness of their the reason that they're slow is also like it used to be a good thing, but now it's not, because we have to really adapt quicker and quicker. And I guess the balance is somewhere. You have like two volume buttons, and you just like here a little bit and there a little bit, and you just have to like chaotically find a way out of this situation.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all four of you. And now the floor is yours. You're welcome to ask questions, share your experiences, either in the CENTRINNO project or elsewhere. And online, again, please ask your questions in the chat so we can grab those as well. Does anyone want to start? We have a microphone going around for whoever wants to start. No? I realize it's almost 5 o'clock. Cecilia, do we have any questions online? No? All right then. Well, I think I will try to ask one last one, perhaps. No. I think we'll set you free. It's almost 5 o'clock. This one? All right. We have a microphone coming just for the sake of the streaming. Thank you.
I'm super hesitating to... we were almost liberated, right? So,
and now comes the big question, right?
No, I don't know. It's an observation that I thought it might be a chance for me to take the floor to share this. It was also inspired by the panel debate yesterday with the other... I don't know how to pronounce the name of the other place in Denmark.
No.
And maybe it's just a thing with... We heard... So, nation state, is it important, yes or no? European Union, we have flags, we have an identity with that. It's a political reality. It's very interesting to hear that actually we follow it. And it reminded me of something that in this project there's that premise of former industrial sites. What does it mean that there was an industry? And Europe is the European steel and coal community, in essence, that under the Cold War chose to become, or chose, consciously or unconsciously follow the neoliberal world. And I think it's just a reminder for me, also listening to you, to think what's the value of reminding us not only of history as, on a local level and stories that we share, memories, but also political history and political realities that we now want missions and we want to perhaps... So let's say deindustrialization was not a natural phenomenon. It was also policy and systems and so on. And as we transition into other systems, also on that level, do we have enough knowledge to look back there? So I know it's not a question, but inspired
very
by...
relevant to the narratives of the past again and what we can...
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone
Thank
else getting brave enough? Now one opened the ball. Torn out. Yeah.
Pietro.
Petro,
No, I mean, I really might relate on this discussion, and I think this is all about of a process. Who's setting the direction is eventually a process of different actors, each with a different role. I mean, a city as a role of enabler, because of course there is the decision-making power, but without the different kind of stakeholders that own the resources, that they own a piece of the resources that you need to combine together to trigger and to go ahead and set the process. So I think it's really an iterative procedure, and it's really complicated to decide who and what sets the directions, but we all need to play a different tile eventually, because if you're not all together aligned in achieving the missions or even in defining it, it's very complicated to go ahead. That's my reflection.
Thank you.
You had some comments, Mikkel. You look like you had a comment for the gentleman.
Yeah, so you can frame it on the same level as Jonathan, because it's a difficult subject. But I mean, the idea that consumption and sustainable consumption and sustainable living is basically is defined by the identities and the norms of a given community. It could be like a local community, it could be a family, it could be a nation state, whatever. It's something that can be influenced. I mean, heritage is one way to kind of, trying to, the discussions we had in Centrinno is all about like imagining this in different ways. But it also seems that there's a huge potential for us to develop that toolbox. I've been really researching also on different subjects, trying to find out how to influence identity, how to influence norms. And it's not there. The toolbox is not there. There might even not be a toolbox for it to be found, but it's something that could be really interesting to explore further.
Alex, did you have a comment as well?
No, I think it's funny what you said, Jonathan, because it's because we have like this transition from a very industrialized landscape to a full service and liberal economies that we are able today to question the relocation of production. If we didn't have these two phases, we will not be able to balance the two. What's the meaning of relocating production in a global landscape? But it's because we had this industrial heritage, and that we keep in a very, very not informal economy, that we are able to say, okay, can we draw back some aspects of this and connect them with the other, for what we are experiencing today. So it's interesting to see. It's because of the different phase of history that we are at this point today all together working on relocation of production.
Great. Anyone else? Going once, going twice? No? That's it from us today. Thank you so much for listening in, both online and here in DDC. If you are interested in learning more about the work that Danish Design Center does with cities and the CENTRINNO project, please go to our website, ddc.dk, or follow us on LinkedIn or our newsletter. Thank you so much.